Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all for today's Ask Me Anything series. So, before moving into the session, I would like to set some guidelines where I request everybody to go on mute and turn on your mic only when you speak. I would now like to invite Ms. Pratishtha Jain, Incubation Manager at IITM HTIC's MedTech Incubator, to chair the session. Over to you, Pratishtha.
Thank you, Harshini. For today's session, we have Mr. Josh Scheffelaar, he's the co-founder for at Launch in US Alliance and founding partner at Kendall-Teams, kTeams. So today's session topic is potentially applying ideas from US to your business in India. So Josh comes with 35 years of experience in global business experience and has worked with high-tech companies in Europe and Asia. His global skills, experience, and understanding of business cultural differences, and by leveraging his extensive professional network, he is advising many international companies in the US market as well. So over to Mr. Josh to set the tone for the session today, and then you will facilitate the question and answer. Sumitra will help in the facilitation of question and answer. Over to you, Mr. Josh.
Good evening. Good evening from Boston in the early morning here. I will present a couple of slides to get the discussion going. And you should see them now, or at least they're on their way. Okay. So my name is Josh Scheffelaar. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but worked in the rest of Europe. I worked in Japan and then moved to the United States, where I've been since 1990. So that puts me as a typical high-tech person who lived in Europe, Asia, and the US. I advise international companies on entering the US. I realize that, especially in these difficult days, that there are few Indian companies that are ready to move to the US, but I know from experience working with European companies that in many cases the methods and experience that was learned in the US is actually applicable in Europe, and I know that much of it, or not all of it, but some of it will also be applicable to India. What is my connection with India? I have been a member of Thai Boston since 2003 and was active in organizing events. It was an interesting experience. I was working in the internet business, which grandiosely collapsed in 2003, and then I was looking for networking options, and I ended up in Thai Boston. I have done business in India for about 6 years. That was just a couple of years ago, and every time I visited India, I was happy to visit Indian universities to do sessions like this. And actually, in 2017, I was fortunate to visit Chennai, and I was at IIT Madras. A little bit about Boston. There are a number of world-class universities. Actually, there's 62 universities in Boston. So higher education is a major industry in Boston. The best known, obviously, are Harvard and MIT, but there are lots of other interesting universities. The universities attracted a lot of research institutions, both academic and commercial. There are a lot of research organizations, research institutes from from large pharma companies. For instance, there is a lot of research going on in the academic hospitals. That created a very strong ecosystem. And one of the reasons why companies want to go here is because there is a lot of well-educated talent. Boston is not good at everything, but the key clusters are life sciences, clean energy, information technology in many verticals. AI is important, and robotics is important. If you compare Boston to Silicon Valley, it is usually the more like technologies based in hard science are here. The consumer technologies like Apple and Google are and Facebook, which actually started here in the Boston area, are more in the Silicon Valley area. You can make a lot of money in consumer stuff, so there's nothing wrong with doing that. But that's not Boston's strength. The role of immigrants in the U.S. According to Wall Street Journal, 55% of the unicorns were started by immigrants. 15% have at least one Indian founder, and 82% of them have at least one executive who is an immigrant. With my European background, I'm a proud immigrant myself. Some of the larger companies in the U.S. have Indian executive. I won't go through the entire list. Maybe I should highlight Desh Deshpande, who is a well-known serial entrepreneur here in Boston, and he does a lot of good work. Also, the Indian people here, and Indian engineers who are not in senior management, they have a very good reputation. And I think one of the strengths of the Indians here in the U.S. is that they I would almost say they act like Americans. They're really part of the core group that runs companies. We see very few startup product companies from India here in the U.S. and hopefully we can change that. Innovation in the U.S. This is at MIT here. They have a formula for everything, obviously. What they say is that innovation is invention plus commercialization. And on the invention part, the ID part, the science part, the Indian technology is at least as good as US technology. And what I've noticed during my visits to India, that the Indian technology is a lot better fit for the developing world. The technology that is being developed in the US is usually based on high-end technology and assumes that everybody has the latest smartphone, etc. And what I found in India, the solutions are very often based on the technology that is available in the community, in the society. So I think actually that India is better positioned to deal with the developing world than the US is. I think what the US is better at is commercialization, where you take, like, if you have a bright, cool ID, but you don't get it out to the market, then that's nice. But it's really the commercialization is a key part of that, and that is what the US is really good at, and I hope that we can discuss later how we can get some of these IDs to India. What I've noticed, both working with European companies, and what I've also noticed in India, that a fundamental difference between selling in the US and selling in the rest of the world, that in the rest of the world, you sell by just talking about your product and your technology and your company. And in the US, that doesn't really work. You really have to convince people that that you are able to solve their problems. And if you can't get that message across, if you can't get across in the first minute of the conversation, I would say that you're able to solve their problems and indicate how you will solve them, they will switch off, and you lost an opportunity. Yeah? And what I've also seen in India is that when I meet people at trade shows, they start with an endless presentation or an endless talk about how great their technology is, but they never ask me what my problem is, and so that's not very productive. So the last slide. So as far as your questions, the discussion is concerned, here are a number of potential areas. It's up to you what you want to discuss. I'm open for everything, even if it's controversial. I just want to be clear that I don't claim that I understand the Indian market. I'm convinced I don't. So don't expect any specific detailed advice on what you need to do. What I really want is to make you better understand what's going in the US and sort of pick what you think is interesting. That's all I have. So I'll stop sharing. And here I am.
So we have some questions in the chat box. So a question from Taneza. So Tane, I think Tanza. So you can unmute
Yeah,
yourself
Tanzila.
and you can unmute yourself and you
Yeah.
can ask the question.
Sir, this is Tanzila here. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Hi, Satina. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I have a question regarding beacon technology. Are you aware of this technology? I wanted to check.
No, I'm not. But if you explain, maybe I just don't know the term.
Yeah. So basically, this is a technology wherein you can scan the barcode of the product, and it could trace back. The product could be traced back to to its original source. And instead of people actually buying the product from the store, they could scan just the barcode, and it'll get automatically. It'll get into the cart and be delivered at home. I was told that this technology is there in the US.
I am not aware of it. There is a lot of automation and innovation going on in the consumer, in the retail area. And it's interesting that a lot of it is really started by Amazon. Amazon is getting into the supermarket and food and product business, and the traditional supermarkets are really scared and are beginning to introduce new technology. And also, the Amazon has in the first place they have acquired a company here called Whole Foods, which is a large supermarket chain. And Amazon has introduced a lot of new technology in their retail area. So your technology would fit in that that ballpark, in that realm. But
Yes,
I think it's sort of early. A lot of companies are experimenting, but I'm not sure it really has been implemented.
All right, sir. Actually, I spoke to one of the mentors in a business school here, who said he lived in Seattle about 10 years ago, and he said back then itself the technology existed, but I obviously we're not sure of how how rampant it is and how many people are using it. But since this he claimed that this technology he had seen in the US, I would really like to work more closely with one of you from there, or either with you or anybody whom you think will be appropriate to help me in this project. I would like to bring the technology to India here, and I'm closely connected to the Retail Association of India. I do webinars for them, and I work with companies, with a company which is very closely associated with the Retail Association. So if somebody could help me get the technology to India, we could retweak here, and then I think it'll be really a game changer in the current situation for Indian retailers.
Okay, why don't we take this offline? Send me an email message, and I'll see what I can do.
Sure. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Tansala. So we have another question from Aravind. So Aravind, you can go unmute yourself and you can ask the question.
Good morning, Mr. Josh. This is Arvind.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon for
Good
you.
morning. Thank you. I have a question. As a startup, we have limited resources. If we want to enter the US market, what should we prioritize? The market positioning and market creation, or the FDA clearances as a medical device developer?
That question has a number of aspects. So if you have a medical device, so you need, depending on what it is, you need FDA certification or FDA approval, and you cannot sell without the approval. So it doesn't make sense to invest in moving and start selling in the US if you can't sell. There's another aspect is there are many. So what is a medical device? You can classify a medical device as something that that heals or that provides medical support, but you can also sell it in the in normal retail stores. So it depends on your positioning. If you have a device that and you don't claim that it will solve medical problems, then you can actually sell it without FDA approval.
Okay,
I
so
can
I
give
think
one.
the question, yeah, the question is pertaining to a medical device, a low risk classification. It's not a high risk; it's a low risk. Yeah, but,
I think
but a medical devices. Yeah.
I think highest priority is to get clearance, because it doesn't make sense to start building an organization if you can't sell.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind, for that. So we have a question from Danush. So Danush, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Sumitra. So, good morning, Mr. Joe. So, my name is Dr. Danush from India. So, I have one question. So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Jones, so my question is that just like any other startup, we also have limited resource. So, when as to your the previous answer, so we also deal with medical devices. I mean, these are wearable devices. So, let's say for the discussion that I have got approval, so our medical devices falls under type 2, that is class 2 of FDA. So let's say I have got the approval. So what do you suggest on how we reach the people, in the sense this is a B2C segment, and so what is your opinion on how should I reach the people there? How should I reach the customers? Like online, or should I have some people there, or so what's your suggestion on that, Josh? So
it depends. So there are a couple of ways. Is one is to work with a partner, and especially in the B2C area, it tends to get quite expensive because you need like the awareness. People in the market have to be aware of your existence, and that means that you have to do heavy marketing, which is expensive. An alternative is that you hook up with you partner with a company that already has the distribution channel.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I think in that area it is the getting known in the marketplace is the key thing.
No, I actually got this question because when you were presenting, you told like the first 30 seconds when you cannot answer them, you've lost an opportunity, right? So when you presented that, I actually got this. So because so I thought like as people are selling, we should be there, or so I was thinking that way. So our presence is vital there, Mr. Josh. Speak with people, or what do you suggest? So.
Yeah, I think the problem in the B2C area is that there are, per definition, many customers, and you can't address them one at a time. So you have to get your message out. There's also a lot of competition in that area, so that means also that your advertising cost is higher. So that is in the B2C area. The same is true, but that you have to get your message like very succinctly through. Only the complication is that there are thousands, tens of thousands of people. So the vehicle of getting your message out becomes more complicated. That's why it's a lot easier to be in the B2B business.
Okay, so actually we also have another product that's also falling into B2B. So so B2B basically, so based on the answer that response that you gave me, so so we need to tie up with the person. So once that is happening, then most of the problems would reduce. Is that correct, Josh?
I'm not sure I understand your question. When you say the person, that is the customer.
Yeah, no, the person in the sense here, B2B, in the B2B market, it can be an hospital, it can be an institute, or it can be a firm whom which we are tying up. So,
right. So it depends a little. So normally, if you sell to hospitals, for instance, it is you need to have. It's very difficult being in India to build visibility, etc., and get known in the marketplace. So people don't buy from people they don't know. Obviously, they don't know you exist. So you have to get known. In the hospital world, it is like you don't sell by advertising or TV commercials. You sell by networking. And by networking, you can only do when you're here. And and assuming that you don't, you have limited resources and don't want to open an office here, there are some people, especially maybe if you go through the Indian community here, that you can have a part-time software or part-time person who networks on your behalf.
Okay.
Networking is very important, and you can't do remote networking.
Okay, understood. Thanks, Mr. Josh, for the answers. Thank you. Really, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you,
you,
Dhanush. Karthik have a couple of questions, so you can go ahead, Karthik.
Hello, sir. Hope you're doing great. I have 3 questions, so I'll make it short.
3?
Just short questions. So you were saying about commercialization, like basically Indians lack commercialization. So I just this question struck my mind. So what kind of do you find any stark differences in the mindset or the thought process of Indian and US entrepreneurs? This is my first question. And so as a startup, so if we decide that we need to expand to US. So what are the questions that we need to ask ourselves before finalizing that decision? This is my second question. And third question is there any process that is like collaboration that is being done between Indian startups and US universities? Like how feasible is that? My three questions.
Okay. The problem with the question is I hardly remember the first one. Yeah, no, I actually do remember.
I mean, thought process.
Yeah, the thought process. So in the first place, like I don't claim to thoroughly know Indian culture. Like one interesting thing is that like I worked a lot here with Indian entrepreneurs here in the US, and the first time I went to India, I expected to find the same type of entrepreneurs, and it was told I visited the university in Hyderabad, and they told me that the Indians in India are not necessarily the same or like the Indians here in the US. And what I personally noticed is the emphasis on technology versus technology is very important, but you can't ignore like how do you sell it? What does it do to the customer? Why should a customer buy it? So that is and that's not like an Indian issue. That is the same issue that I see in Europe. One of the surprising things was that a lot of the challenges that people have in India are exactly the same as people have in Europe. And so I think it's that is one problem, that not focusing on why people should buy from you. I think the other one is probably risk taking. In the US, if you don't take risk, you'll die. So there's a lot more risk taking, which is sort of consistent with what I said earlier. It is not the technology, the quality of the technology. It is like what you do with the technology. And in Europe and India, the focus usually is too much on the technology and not on why you should buy from me.
Get it, sir. My second question was about, so if we decide to expand to the US, so what are the questions that we have to ask ourselves? Like what are the things that we have to jot down, whether we are ready or not to expand?
I think so. It's always good to explore. So I don't think you should you should spend $1 million to come here and then try to find out whether your product actually sells. So it is you need a story, you need a value proposition, and that gets back to what I said earlier. If you are here and you don't have a story, if you come and say like, well, I've got the best technology, like people just go away and say like I've got better things to do. So it's to test market, so to say, what you're doing, which is difficult from India, and that gets back to what I said. If you can find someone here who represents you part-time and can sort of spread the ID and goes to networking sessions and say, oh, I've got this friend in India who does this, and you get a lot of feedback that way.
Yes, sir. So my third final question was about the collaboration between Indian startups and US universities, the feasibility of that, or any examples for that.
I don't know any examples. It's so U.S. universities in general. So I think in general, doing anything with the U.S., it has to be a win-win situation. So it's not that U.S. universities are desperately looking to help Indian startups, but if you can offer something to a U.S. university, that they say, wow, that is interesting. I don't think U.S. universities don't care of if it's interesting. They don't care whether it's from India or the U.S. or etc. But obviously the other issue again is that if the universities don't know you exist, nothing is going to happen. But I'm sure that that if you have someone here, or if you would be here, the problem with you being here is you can't be here for a year at a time. So so it's in those cases it's best to have someone who for instance, there are lots of Indian students here, and I'm sure they wouldn't mind if you give them a couple of $100 that they spread the word in their universities.
Get it.
So, bottom line is, if you in the US is very much driven, if it's interesting for me, I'll help you. If it's just you want me to put a lot of time in it and do things, and there's nothing in it for me, then I'm not going to do it.
Get it, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, can we have your contact details to connect you to post?
That'll be helpful.
Yeah. It was on my first slide, which you probably didn't write down, but you're free to contact me.
Oh, I'm sorry. So could you
Any
show
more
that
questions?
slide again?
Sorry?
Could you please show that slide again if you don't mind?
Yep, I have to unfold all my engineering talents to get this slide back. There you go. It's coming. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for sharing the details. That will be helpful for most of them, sir. So we have another question from Rajkumar. So Rajkumar, you can go unmute and yourself and you can ask the question. Rajkumar, we can't hear you. I think you have some issues in. We can't hear you, Rajkumar. No. Otherwise, you can post the question. I can help you because we can't hear you. Okay, he will post it, sir. So we have some questions, sir. So the startups we used to ask questions regularly. These questions. So what kind of strategies can Indian startups adopt from the US in raising capital, sir? So you can answer to this question, sir.
So raising capital for international companies, overseas companies in the US is difficult because most investors here, there are enough US startups around that they don't want to go through the trouble to work with companies that are far away. It's also it's not that the investors don't like foreigners, but it also there are additional complications with foreign laws and all that sort of things. So in general, it is difficult. It's hard to find investors in the US who will invest in companies in India. There is one exception, and that is corporate investors. So those are large corporations. There has been a shift in trend that in the past, large corporations would have their own R&D and lots of PhDs in white coats who would invent things and develop things and do research. And more large corporations are actually looking at startups because it's a lot more cost efficient to buy a startup than to take the risk of doing it yourself. And so that and the strategic investors, the corporate investors, are they're focused on the strategic importance and not whether the country or the company is in India or somewhere else. So that is definitely usually for overseas companies a better opportunity. Another thing that we see happening is I started saying that U.S. investors they prefer to invest in U.S. companies, and in many cases, like Indian or European companies, what they do is they actually legally or from a legal point of view change themselves into a U.S. company, and then obviously these problems will go away. In the case of India, sometimes there are angel investors of Indian descent who are more comfortable with investing in Indian companies.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So Rajkumar is asking, so his patent is approved for publishing, wish to develop the product that crowdfunding your views. So his patent has been approved in public. So he's asking for the views. Sir. I think I didn't get it the question correctly.
Yeah, I don't totally. So he has a patent, and it has been approved.
So he didn't have a patent. He's approved. He's saying.
I think he's asking views about crowdfunding.
About crowdfunding in the US, I assume.
I mean, he mentioned that very general.
Yeah, I think there have in crowdfunding. So there are two ways of crowdfunding. One is where you give out equity, and the other one is where you in some cases like it is prepayment of product. If I have a cool device, I can get crowdfunding and say, like, if you give me $500, then when my device comes out, then I'll give you the device. So that is done very much, or they've done frequently. Through equity, there are all sorts of restrictions that so it's not as easy. So only registered investors can invest in equity, and so that in the US is a lot more difficult. Although it has started, but there are still restrictions on it that not everybody can put in funds to fund for equity. And another interesting aspect of crowdfunding is that it sometimes helps getting investor money. So because if there is a lot of interest from the public in a crowdfunding context, for investors, that is an indication that there is an interest in the product, and that can play a role.
Thank you, sir. So we have another question also. So for a startup to build his network in the US, so what kind of activity should be taken by the startup?
I think networking in the US, like you have to be there. And if you can't be there yourself, which I think in most cases is the case, you'll have to find someone else who does it on your behalf. And you can either hire a full-time person, or you can try to find a part-time person a student or like an Indian, the U.S. Indian person or an Indian U.S. person. There is an additional thing is which is not particular for India, but it's for Europe as well. To network here, you have to be here, but it's also you have sort of to understand the ecosystem and behave like an American. As I said, why a lot of Indian entrepreneurs here in the US are successful is because they just act as American, which is very difficult when you when you have never lived here. And it may take you a year to get up to speed, which so in those cases it's better to find someone who is already here and who can have a fresh start. And especially in many cases, if you select these people carefully, they may already have a network that you can use.
Okay, sir. So the next question is, what kind of US market exploration program can be availed for a startup to scale up their business, sir?
There was Smart Grid.
Sir?
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I understood the question. It was about Smart Grid.
Yes, sir. I think I.
Hello, Mr. Josh. Yeah.
Yep.
So the other question is from Mr. Bunny Dande. He's asking that he's suggesting that he has a patentable concept and he's looking to help. He's looking for some help in patenting and the procedure that he has to follow around patenting.
Okay, I'm not a patent expert. Like what you would normally do is you would go to a patent attorney. I don't think anyone here does. They would do that themselves. And there are. I think, as I said, I'm not an expert, but there are some provisional patents which are cheaper, and which basically get you into the system.
Right. So what
But
would
yep.
top three things that an Indian startup should consider before they actually venture into the US market?
I think the first, point number one is that you have to have an ID and a message and a value proposition. Spending a lot of money getting here and not having a story is a waste of time and money. So you have to be prepared and try to find out whether your ID is actually something that is sellable into the US. So that is the homework. I think the next thing is that you have to, like you can dream up all sorts of things, and that doesn't apply only to Indian companies, but also to US startups. Like you have to have to package your ID, make a judgment, like, is this something that the people would buy, and why would they buy it, which is probably the most important question. And then the next step is that you have to test it, because sitting in your office and coming up with bright IDs, you really have to get it out and test it in the market. And the methodology of the lean startup here in Greece is good, where you just go out and pretend that it's there and get feedback and adjust it. And if it's good, if it's well received, then there's still no guarantee that it will work. But then you will go and sort of sell it on a limited scale. It's also an area that the U.S. is a huge country. Like India isn't that small either, but to conquer the U.S. market is a big task. So it's good to start in a limited area.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have another question on marketing. So, what would be some of the techniques for marketing a product or device in a startup? A startup in India can adopt from the US startups.
So the first coming back to that again, you need a strong message. If you don't have a strong message, then you don't get very far. So if you have it needs to be a hard-hitting message. Plus, it needs to be really brief because of this thing. You really have to break through the clutter. Just starting with a long story about how it works doesn't work here because people if people are not interested, you can't see how they can use it. They're definitely not interested in how it works. So that is the part you need to have a good message. The second way of getting it out is depends on whether you're in B2B or in B2C. In B2B, you would network. In B2C, it is the using social media is an inexpensive way of getting your message out. And there again, it's better to focus on a certain area of the US than to go coast to coast on day one.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So the most question that we usually get is about going global. So some of the startups have this fancy of starting up and then moving to the US, and so do you think it's a good idea to set up without actually getting some traction in their domestic, their home country?
So when I work with European companies, the message is basically like the US is a very complicated market. If you have never sold anything in your home country, then like the US is not a place where you train, and it is really, you have to have a certain traction and know how to do things before you come to the US. So certainly get going in India, get traction there, and then look at the rest of the world. And India is large enough that you have lots of customers, potential customers there. So don't come to the US too early.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have enough problems to solve ourselves. So I think we should get some traction here in India before we can look at getting traction in different countries as well. So with here, I just want to stop here and ask if there are any questions from the audience. We're nearing almost 6 o'clock. Before we wrap up, any questions from the audience?
No.
We're good? Okay. So before we wrap up, a couple of things. We have one question from Bunny Dade. Bunny, do you want to ask the question yourself? Do you want to unmute and ask your question? Okay, the mic is not working, no problem. Okay, so his question is, can you relate us with current biological technologies and defense tactical wearables DARPA working on, and how one from India being a startup can approach to DARPA for defense technological works? that's very specific to the defense industry.
Yeah. There is a lot of defense industry here, so I'm not a DARPA specialist, but I gave a number of. I actually myself worked for a company called Bolt Beranek and Newman, which was actually the prime contractor on ARPANET, which was the forerunner of the internet. And the whole robotics industry comes from DARPA. So DARPA is a good funding source for technology development. And actually, it's not always the military technology side, because, like, for instance, there are the whole robotics. Boston Technologies is a company that makes these walking robots, and so they're used for defense purposes, but it's a sort of useful technology. I think in general, I don't know exactly the legal restrictions of DARPA, but in most cases it's best to work through a U.S. company. Because if there are any restrictions, especially in the military area, to have contracts between the U.S. military, the U.S. Department of Defense, and overseas companies, may be difficult. But maybe there's a way to go through other companies. Maybe also there is here in Boston, there is this an organization called the CIC, which is the Cambridge Innovation Center, and they have weekly venture cafe nights. And I know recently they had an evening on defense technology, and I think these sessions are actually on YouTube. So maybe that's an interesting place to start.
Thank you. Hope that's answered Bunny's question. He's mentioned that the application can be in different sectors as well, and yeah, that's it. So, any other questions from the audience before we wrap up today's AMA session? Any questions? Prem, I think you unmute. Do you want to ask anything?
Yeah, can I ask one quick question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for this session. So I have lived in US for 6 years, and I also have an SSN. I have worked in US, but now it's been a break of like 5 years. So now as a startup, we want to establish a branch there. Like what should I proceed? Okay, audible?
I think there's someone who needs to. Yep. Person muted himself. Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, can I ask the question?
Yep.
Okay. So I have lived and worked in the US for close to 6 years, and I also have an SSN number. So now I have left US for 5 years now, and now to kind of establish a branch of my startup there, how should I proceed? I already have an SSN number.
So there are restrictions right now entering the U.S., both because of COVID and the U.S. administration, the Trump administration, who isn't very friendly to people moving into the U.S. So, did you have a green card or?
No, actually, I'm not planning to move. I just want to establish a branch.
Okay.
Branch startup.
Yeah, to open a branch, you don't. It doesn't really matter whether you have an SSN, a social security number or not. You can open. You don't have to be in the country to open a branch.
Okay.
So there are a number of it's very easy to incorporate to become an official company, and I would suggest that it's better to have a formal legal presence. and you do not have to be a U.S. citizen to start a company. There are no requirements for capitalization. You don't have to give money to the government before you can start. And that's actually one of the reasons why startups here, they very often they start a company, and if it doesn't work, a year later they fold it again, and it's not very expensive.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Prem. Thank you, Josh. So with this, I think we will wrap up the session. We have posted a feedback form for the session. Please share your feedback to help us improve our sessions, our upcoming sessions. Thank you so much, Josh, for taking the time out and sharing your morning with us. It's early in the morning here, late evening in India. So thank you so much for coming online and answering those questions very patiently. Some of our startups were very active and asked some questions, very pertinent questions on how to launch in the US. Thank you once again. Hope to see you guys again. The next session is going to be on Tuesday, the knowledge session on regulatory again. So please do join us for any queries on regulatory. And we will have more AMA sessions coming your way. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Josh, just one question before you leave.
Yeah, we left.